Hello, and welcome back to The Story of Rhode Island, the podcast that tells you the story of Rhode Island's fascinating history. In Season 2, we watched Rhode Island play a leading role in the American Revolution, an event that enabled the colonies to obtain their independence from Great Britain. But as we dive into Episode 1 of Season 3, we see that the United States is not as independent as they would hope to be. We learn about this troubling reality by visiting a 51-year-old wealthy businessman and abolitionist named Moses Brown. It's a frigid winter night in 1789, and Moses stands comfortably inside his elegant house, located about a mile east of downtown Providence. Filled with furniture that's been crafted by Newport's finest artisans and silverware made to perfection in Boston, his home illustrates the prosperity shared by the wider Brown family. While peering out his window, he looks past his expansive estate known as the Elm Grove and sets his eyes on the Seekonk River to the southeast. It was down this river 150 years ago that Roger Williams traveled so that he could create the town of Providence, a place that gave religious outcasts of the world the freedom they so anxiously desired. One of those outcasts was Moses' ancestor, Chad Brown, a man who became the first Baptist pastor in America. The Brown family remained in the region for generations and eventually found fame and fortune through Moses and his brother, John. But as Moses peers out his window, it's not his family history or wealth that fills his mind, but instead, a problem. A problem that affects not only Rhode Island, but the entire nation. Because even though the United States is technically an independent nation, it's still heavily reliant on England for manufactured goods, one of the primary goods being textile products like yarn, cloth, and fabric. Americans still rely on their former mother country for textiles because England's industrialized economy has access to extremely powerful machinery that enables them to produce these goods far more efficiently than America's largely agrarian economy. And to make sure that they retain this competitive advantage, England has made it illegal for anyone with knowledge of this technology to immigrate to another country. Moses and his business partners have attempted to recreate some of this machinery in Rhode Island, but have failed time and time again, leading them to give up on what seems like a hopeless endeavor. But sitting on the table beside Moses' window is a letter from a man he's never met before that's making him rethink that decision. The author of the letter is a newly arrived English immigrant who's claiming to know how to build the machines that are used in England to automatically produce textile goods. To make it even more interesting, he's telling Moses he wants to team up with him so that they can build them. Given the enormity of the claim and the fact that it's coming from a man he's never met before, Moses doubts its authenticity. But at the same time, he takes a moment to ask himself, what if it's true? What if this mysterious man can actually do as he says? The Providence merchant knows that if they were to build these machines, then their nation would be able to take the first step towards true economic independence. And so, deciding that the risk is worth the reward, Moses writes a letter back to the English immigrant, telling him that he'd like to meet him. After finishing his letter, he inserts it into an envelope and addresses it to Samuel Slater. Neither Moses Brown or Samuel Slater know it yet, but they've just set forth a chain of events that will prove to be successful beyond their wildest dreams. Not only will they help free America from its dependence on England for textile goods, but they will introduce America to the world of industrialization, setting it down a path that will change their nation forever. But before that can happen, Samuel Slater must actually build these incredibly complicated machines, and he's about to find out it'll be far more difficult than he expected. He'll encounter challenges that lead him to doubt his abilities, and Moses to wonder why he ever trusted him in the first place. But Slater will continue to persevere and eventually find a way to recreate this revolutionary technology, an accomplishment that will forever make him known as the father of the American Industrial Revolution. The story of Samuel Slater, teaming up with a group of determined Rhode Islanders to ignite the American Industrial Revolution, is what we'll cover in the first episode of Season 3 of the Story of Rhode Island podcast. Walking down a street in Pawtucket on a brisk January day in 1790 are 5 men. 4 of these men are successful merchants that are related through either blood or marriage. They include Moses Brown, a man we just met, his son, Obadiah Brown, his cousin, Smith Brown, and finally, his son-in-law, William Almy. As they walk, their close proximity to one another illustrates the strength of their bond, while their swagger demonstrates their ranking in society. In a state that's ruled by the wealthy merchant class, these men are at the top of the ladder. They are members of the prestigious Brown family of Providence, a city that's recently overtaken Newport as Rhode Island's most prosperous community. Fueling the Browns family's success is a fleet of commercial vessels lining the Providence River that trade with nations in Europe, the West Indies, and even as far as China. However, to ensure they diversify their investments, the Browns also dabble in cod fishing, a rum distillery, and an iron forge called the Hope Furnace. As their portfolio expands, so do their number of partnerships. With names like Brown and Rogers, Brown and Francis, and Brown and Ives, they highlight the fact that no matter how much their business interests expand, they always remain in the family. It's partially due to this familial mindset why Samuel Slater, the fifth man we see walking in Pawtucket, remains at somewhat of a distance from the others. While remaining a few paces behind them, he uses the alone time to process the drastic changes that have just occurred in his life. Originally from Belper, England, Slater spent years working as an apprentice in a cotton factory before rising to the rank of factory overseer. Although this presented him with a comfortable career, he realized that England's oversaturated cotton manufacturing market would likely prevent him from ever rising above the rank of a mere factory operator. It was around this time when he began hearing about American entrepreneurs wanting to replicate England's cotton manufacturing machines. Slater saw this as an opportunity for fame and fortune, so in September of 1789, he deliberately broke England's law banning men of his expertise from leaving the country and headed for America. About a month after arriving, he heard of Moses Brown's failed attempts at rebuilding the same cotton manufacturing machines that he worked on in England, and decided this was the opportunity he was looking for. And now, with Slater walking just a few paces behind Moses and his powerful business partners, he feels his dreams of fortune getting closer. With supreme confidence in his abilities, he truly believes it'll only be a matter of time before he goes from Samuel Slater, the penniless immigrant, to a businessman known for bringing industrialization to America. He can already picture his immaculate mansion filled with luxurious goods from exotic nations. Images of elaborate dinners with elite members of American society circulate in his mind as if they were a play. But Slater's daydreaming is interrupted when he feels his face slam against the back of one of the men walking in front of him. So caught up in his daydreaming, he failed to recognize that the men he's with had stopped walking. Slater, embarrassed by his mistake, quickly takes a step back and apologizes for the mishap. While acknowledging the error with an irritated look on his face, William Almy lets Slater know that they've arrived at their destination, an old clothier's shop on the banks of the Blackstone River. After looking up at the raggedy building in front of him, Slater makes his way through the front door. Once inside, Moses begins pointing to the various cotton spinning machines his mechanics have attempted to recreate, only to see them fail time and time again. The array of parts strewn upon the floor like discarded pieces of trash and the layers of dust filling the room tell the story of a once hopeful project that's since been given up on. Such a disheartening scene allows Slater to truly understand just how far this young nation is from industrialization. Unlike England, it's a country full of farmers, artisans, and merchants, not industrialists. While Moses attempts to crudely explain what's prevented his team from being successful, Slater begins circling the broken-down cotton spinning machines with an intense look on his face. While tilting his head side to side and pulling on the strings that are meant to move the machine's complex array of parts, Slater can be seen talking to himself the way one does when they're taking mental notes. But while we wait for Slater to complete his analysis of the machines in front of him, let me give you a quick overview of the state of 18th century textile manufacturing and where these machines fit into the picture. So the process of textile manufacturing begins when cotton is grown and processed by enslaved men and women. Then, most of that cotton is shipped to factories in England so that it can be spun into yarn. And finally, that yarn is woven into cloth. For today's episode, we're only focusing on the second step, manufacturing cotton yarn, as we'll focus on the other steps later this season. Okay, so the reason why England dominates the yarn manufacturing market is because an Englishman named Richard Arkwright invented a set of water power machines that automatically spins cotton into yarn. Since this process is still done by hand in America, England can manufacture cotton yarn 50 times faster than the average American. The instruments that make this possible are the cotton carding and cotton spinning machines, the latter being what Slater is currently analyzing in Brown's workshop. While the cotton carding machine cleans and prepares the cotton spinning machine then replicates the extremely delicate pulling and twisting process that's done to spin cotton into yarn. Now, it's important to note that water power technology itself isn't anything new to Americans. In fact, they've been using the energy of flowing rivers for basic tasks like grinding grain since the 17th century. And remember, Americans also produce some of their own cotton yarn as well. They just do it manually. But what Brown and Slater are trying to do, and what no American has ever done before, is combine those two things. By building the cotton carding and cotton spinning machines, they will be the first Americans to use water power technology to automatically spin cotton into yarn. And so this is why Slater, a penniless immigrant, is so valuable to the Brown family. However, as we turn our attention back to Slater, we see just how far he is from making all of this happen. While looking at the machines built by the Rhode Islanders, Slater shakes his head and bluntly states that the machines are, quote, good for nothing and are worth nothing more than old iron, unquote. William Almy, annoyed by the fact that this penniless immigrant would dare talk to them in such a manner, responds by saying there's no way Slater could be so sure of all that after such a brief analysis. Slater responds by simply pointing out the machine's various mechanical errors. He rattles off mistake after mistake to the point where Moses grows tired of the bickering and tells the men to be quiet. Moses admits that Slater clearly has a far better understanding of this technology than they do, so there's no sense in arguing with him. Slater, happy to finally see one of these men respecting him, nods at Brown to show his appreciation. But Moses then continues to tell the young man that before they can go into business with him, he's got to prove himself. And to do that, he must fix one of their cotton spinning machines. If he's able to do this, then, and only then, will they officially partner with Slater to build the other machine, the cotton carding machine. Slater, thrilled by the opportunity, accepts the offer and immediately gets to work. However, he doesn't do it alone. Feverishly working beside him are local mechanic Sylvanus Brown, Oziel Wilkinson, Oziel's son David Wilkinson, and a free black man named Samuel Prime. Together, they work day and night to rebuild the cotton spinning machine in Brown's shop. The work is exhausting, but they know that repairing the tool will be a huge step forward, because it'll mean that one of the two machines needed for manufacturing yarn will be complete. Then, just a couple of months later, their hard work pays off, and they manage to rebuild the cotton spinning machine. William Almy and Smith Brown are so impressed by what Slater's done that they agree to set up a business partnership with him. Moses Brown decides to abstain from the partnership, but he does remain heavily invested in the endeavor. Unfortunately, before the partnership even begins, Slater has a fundamental business disagreement with Almy and Brown, an event that foreshadows the future challenges Slater will face with his business partners. Since Slater isn't a member of the Brown family, Almy and Brown have a hard time trusting him. Therefore, when discussing the terms of their partnership, they try to make him a mere employee instead of an actual partner. But Slater immediately shuts that down. After all, he didn't break the law and come to America just so he could become a mere factory operator again. No, he wants fame and fortune, and he knows that the only way he'll be able to get this is by being a part owner. So with this in mind, he rejects the offer and states that the only way he'll go into business with them is if he's not only a partner, but is also given an equal share of the profits. The two successful merchants find themselves shocked by the request and hesitate to accept it. But at the same time, they know that Slater's talents are invaluable, so they're forced to accept his counteroffer, and the partnership of Almy, Brown, and Slater is formed. And so, by April of 1790, after being in Rhode Island for a matter of months, Slater has already made substantial progress towards his goal of becoming a wealthy industrialist. He's not only recreated one of the two machines needed to mass-produce cotton yarn, but has also established a partnership with some of the most powerful people in Rhode Island. All he needs to do now is build the second piece of machinery, the cotton carding machine. Once this is done, Slater will have the technology he needs for his very own water-powered cotton spinning mill, a type of factory never seen before in America. But as we're about to see, Slater's road ahead will not be easy. Over the next several months, he'll encounter technical challenges that push him to his limits and make him wonder whether he actually has what it takes to succeed. Samuel Slater is not a small man. At over 6 feet tall and well over 200 pounds, he's far larger than the average 18th century American. But as he sits on a chair next to a malfunctioning cotton carding machine, he feels small. It's August of 1790, and after numerous failed attempts at rebuilding the cotton carding machine, he feels as though the task at hand is too large. His dream of bringing this extremely powerful technology to America has since turned into a nightmare that looms over him day and night, the weight of which presses down on him like nothing he's ever felt before. Needless to say, Slater is in over his head. Thankfully, surrounding him is a group of hard-working, brilliant individuals who refuse to let Slater fail. And 2 of these men he's gotten to know quite well, Ozeel Wilkinson and his son, David. Since arriving in Pawtucket, Slater's been living with the Wilkinsons. This has not only allowed him to get close with Ozeel and his son, but his daughter, Hannah, as well. In fact, Slater's developed quite an affection for his daughter, and it's beginning to look as though their friendship might just flourish into something far more serious. But at the moment, Hannah is the last thing on his mind. As he disheartenedly sits at the Pawtucket clothier shop, all he can think about is how it's been 6 months since he went into partnership with William Olney and Smith Brown, and he's yet to build the machinery needed to automatically spin cotton into yarn. What already started out as an extremely complicated project has grown even more difficult since Slater found out that the iron in America, a resource that is a crucial part of the machine, is nowhere near the same quality as what's in England. It also doesn't help that since Slater couldn't risk sneaking the designs of these machines to America, he's forced to recreate them by memory. Then, as if on cue, Ozeel hands Slater a letter from Moses Brown asking him if he's had any success yet. Like anyone who's ever received an email from their boss asking for an update on an overdue project, Slater feels a sense of anxiety rush through his body. Realizing that Slater's in a bad way, David Wilkinson walks over to him and reassures him that they'll get there. They just need to keep pushing forward. So that's what they do. Throughout the summer and fall of 1790, the team of men continue battling through a series of failed attempts. But in each one of those failures is a lesson that they use to make their next attempt slightly more successful. Slater continues to leverage his years of knowledge with these machines to get them closer to a design that will finally work. Meanwhile, the Wilkinsons shift and shape the iron so that it will fit Slater's new designs. Eventually, their tireless effort and ingenuity begins to pay off, and before long, they find themselves sitting on the precipice of a monumental achievement. And as we revisit Slater in the winter of 1790, we get to see the end result of their impassioned work and witness the door to industrialization be opened in America for the very first time. It's December of 1790, and Samuel Slater is seen standing outside the same Pawtucket clothier shop he first visited almost a year ago. A place that back then was filled with a bunch of broken down cotton spinning machines that had little hope of ever working. Beside Slater are Moses Brown, William Olney, and Smith Brown, a group of men who took a gamble on Slater months earlier. With a look of excitement on his face, Slater opens the door of the clothier shop and guides the men into the building. Upon entering, the Providence businessmen are immediately given a glimpse into the future. All around them are water-powered textile machines manufacturing yarn at a pace never seen before in America. As the swift currents of the Blackstone River spin a large wooden wheel, carding machines prepare cotton for spinning, while spinning frames take that cotton and turn it into yarn. As the machine's various parts move and slam up against each other, the building is filled with the same loud noises Slater grew so accustomed to as a factory operator in England. Moving quickly across the floor are 9 young children who have been trained to operate this fast-paced technology. Moses, a man who has long dreamed of building these machines in America, has a hard time believing what he's seeing. But instead of jubilation, his face is filled with skepticism. As he quietly walks through the shop, he waits for one of the machines to stop working, a sight he grew so familiar with before Slater had arrived. Noticing the man's doubt, Slater attempts to get Moses' attention by calling out to him, but he gets no response. Then, Slater calls out again and again, but still, nothing. Finally, he walks over to Brown, grabs him by the arm, and says, "Moses, it works. We've done it." Moses slowly looks back at the man who a year earlier boldly claimed he could build these machines, and finally comes to the realization that he's delivered on that promise. After letting out a loud laugh, he begins shaking Slater's hand to thank him for what he's done. Then, Slater, Olney, and the Browns begin to celebrate, congratulating one another on the fact that for the first time in America, cotton is being spun into yarn via water-powered technology. The men know that this is the first step to moving America into the age of industrialization and enabling them to finally gain their economic independence from their mother country. And so this is when Samuel Slater begins to emerge as the father of the American Industrial Revolution, a title that he rightly deserves and one that each and every Rhode Islander should be proud of. However, what we should also be proud of are the various other Rhode Islanders who helped to make this happen. Businessmen like Moses Brown, who are willing to take a chance on a man that he's never met before. And talented craftsmen and laborers like Ozio Wilkinson, David Wilkinson, Sylvanus Brown, and Samuel Prime, whose mastery of their craft enabled them to build the material needed for Slater's designs. It was because of their united effort why they were able to recreate this powerful technology in an old Pawtucket clothier shop, an achievement that marks the dawn of a new era in Rhode Island. Over the next several decades, the focus of Rhode Island's economy, demographic of its people, and day-to-day life of its everyday individuals will be completely flipped on its head, a development that we'll watch unfold throughout this season. But those radical modifications are still years away. Before that can happen, Slater must first play his paternal role as the father of the American Industrial Revolution and guide Rhode Island into this new era. He must convince them to give up on the ways of the past so that they can move into the future. He'll attempt to do this by building America's first water-powered cotton spinning factory on the Blackstone River, a monumental establishment he aptly calls Slater Mill. Unfortunately, he'll immediately find himself at odds with both his workforce and business partners, who struggle to accept the changes that come with industrialization. After years of stiff opposition, Slater will eventually come to the realization that if he's going to be successful, he must have more control. He must carve out his own part of Rhode Island so that it can build his own industrial society, a place that will show these merchants, farmers, and artisans what this new world is going to look like. But that's a story for next time, on next week's episode of the Story of Rhode Island podcast. Thank you for listening to The Story of Rhode Island. If you enjoyed today's episode, please be sure to follow the podcast and leave a review. Also, if you're looking for a fun way to explore historic Rhode Island locations, follow the links in this episode to learn more about a new mobile app history hunt experience. Sponsored by the Battle of Rhode Island Association and produced by Fresh Maps, the revolutionary RA History Hunt self-guided walking and driving tours take you on location to learn what happened in and around Rhode Island during the American Revolution era. It really is very fun, so I suggest checking it out on freshmaps.us. And last, but certainly not least, I'd like to give a special thanks to Rangers Allison Horrocks and Mark Mello at the Blackstone River Valley National Historical Park. The guidance they provided played a critical role in creating today's episode. To learn more about Samuel Slater and his achievements, I highly suggest visiting Old Slater Mill, which is open Thursdays to Sundays from 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. from spring to fall. Thank you again, and see you next time.